A really hot topic in the mix world is compression. Specifically, compressing directly, meaning putting a compressor right on your track, versus parallel compression, meaning not compressing the direct track, but sending a copy of that direct track through an aux to a separate compressor and then compressing rather heavily and then sneaking in that signal, or even compressing directly and then sending it to more parallel compression. This is something that a lot of engineers have a really strong opinion on, including myself. So let's clarify a few things and also talk about how I'm going to use both types of compression in this mix. So I am not a big fan of compression on the direct track unless I really have to. Now, a compressor maintains dynamic equality, meaning that it will control the differences between loud and quiet on a given program or a given instrument, right? Now, when we're talking about EDM or pop music, most of it is sample-based, where I have the same kick drum repeating. There's no difference in velocity, there's no difference in timbre, and there's no difference in the heaviness of the hit. So does it need a compressor? There are no dynamics. It's even every time. So the first rule of thumb, and I don't believe in rule of thumbs, but if you gotta have one, the first rule of thumb is do not throw a compressor on a track just because you saw something on the internet and they say, oh, this compression sounds cool. If you do like the sound of compression, like your boy, I love the sound of compression. I feel like it gives an urgency, and I feel that if you do it the right way, it will even complement the rhythm of the record. However, it's always at the sacrifice of your transient. Now, the transient is usually where the initial impact of sound comes from, creating the forward excursion from the speakers. In today's music, when you're mastering stuff so loud, you usually get that loudness by sacrificing a transient, right? The limiter is going to come down and squash your transient and bring up the noise floor, creating a higher average in level, and you lose punch. So I need to make sure that in my mix, I have enough, maybe even more, to get kind of obliterated or squashed by a limiter if it has to be really hit hard in mastering. So the way I do this is by employing both direct and parallel. If I want something to sound compressed, but I want to maintain its transient, I will send that to a parallel compressor that enhances the tone and enhances the sustain in a way that I feel complements the track, and I'll sneak that level in. But I won't put a compressor directly on the track in order to maintain that forward excursion that the transient creates. So let's say I have a vocal which is inherently dynamic. I'm going to need to compress it in order to make it easier to sit in the mix. And I will favor a touch of direct compression, but I will also use automation, meaning I'm going to ride a fader. So those two things will make sure that the loud stuff stays within a certain range and the quiet stuff isn't too quiet that it's eaten up by the rest of the mix. Now, to create that urgency or excited tone that you get from a compressor, I'll send the vocal to a parallel compressor that's really hitting it hard, and I'll sneak that in. So I'm not crushing the vocal directly. Those transients are still alive, but that extra urgency and that extra excitement, it's still there from the other parallel compressor. So when you're working on a record, keep in mind, does the thing that I want to put a compressor on have to be compressed? Think about what it is. So if it's a kick drum sample that's played 4 on the floor and repeats, that really needs no compression because the dynamics are even throughout the rest of the record. But if you feel like the compressor can give some character to it, send it to a parallel, sneak that character in, and make sure you preserve those transients. If you see someone on the internet that tells you, put a compressor on this drum or this and it'll sound like XYZ, You could try it, but preserve those transients. Think about what's going to happen after you pass the song along to the mastering engineer. Because in order to get that excitement from those transients, from especially the kick and the bass, you got to treat them with respect. So be careful with the compression. If you like the sound, sneak it in with some parallel.